They laughed at you. Yeah, I can almost still hear it. Those quiet little whispers behind your back, those fake smiles, they'll never make it. Conversations they thought you'd never find out about. But you know what the funniest part is? The real joke isn't you. The joke is they accidentally exposed the truth themselves. Somebody talked too much. Somebody got nervous. Somebody made one tiny mistake. And now everybody knows you were that one. The one they watched. The one they underestimated. The one they tried to play like a background character, only to realize too late you were the main plot twist all along. You didn't beg for attention. You didn't explain yourself. You didn't fight for validation. You just stayed quiet, calculating, smiling, waiting. And now look what happened. They screwed up so badly. The secret is out. Now the same people who ignored you are studying you. The same people who doubted you are mentioning your name in rooms you've never even entered. Funny how that works, right? See, this speech isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when patience becomes power, when silence becomes strategy, and when a person they thought was nothing becomes someone they can't ignore anymore. So sit back, because this story, it's not about how they betrayed you. It's about how they accidentally revealed who you really were. Silence is a language most people don't understand because they are too busy making noise. While they were talking, explaining, showing off, and trying to prove their worth to the world, you were doing something far more dangerous. You were watching. Every word they said, every fake smile they gave, every hidden intention they thought nobody noticed became information. And information in the hands of someone patient becomes power. They thought your silence meant weakness. They thought because you didn't react, you didn't understand. Because you didn't argue, you didn't have a response. Because you didn't defend yourself, you had no defense. That was their first mistake. People fear loud enemies, but they get destroyed by quiet observers. The person who speaks the least often knows the most. While they were busy trying to pull you into drama, you were busy mastering control. Control over your emotions. Control over your reactions. Control over your next move. Because real strength is not shown in how loud you can shout, but in how calm you can stay when everyone expects you to break. Every insult you ignored confused them. Every time you refused to react frustrated them. Every moment you chose discipline over chaos made them uncomfortable. Why? Because they needed your reaction to feel powerful. They needed your anger to feel important. But you gave them nothing, and nothing is the most terrifying response to people who live for attention. Silence also gave you something they never had. Clarity. When you stop talking, you start seeing. You start noticing patterns. You start understanding who is real and who is pretending. You start realizing who supports you in private and who only performs in public. Silence removes illusions, because when you stop announcing your moves, people reveal their true intentions. And the more you stayed quiet, the more they exposed themselves. They talked too much. They showed jealousy too openly. They revealed insecurity without realizing it. They tried to compete with someone who wasn't even competing. Imagine fighting a war against someone who refuses to enter the battlefield. That's the psychological trap they fell into. And your silence was not empty. It was preparation. While they were distracted by appearances, you were focused on progress. While they chased validation, you built value. While they wanted quick victories, you built permanent strength. That's why when results finally appeared, they looked shocked. To them it looked sudden. To you it was just the result of everything you built quietly. There is something very unsettling about a person who doesn't need to announce their strength. Most people try to look powerful. Very few become powerful. You chose to become instead of perform. And that choice separated you from the crowd more than any speech ever could. They didn't realize silence can also be a test of who respects you without constant interaction, a test of who stays loyal without daily contact, a test of who believes in you without needing updates. Many failed that test without even knowing they were being tested. And the most dangerous part, silence protects your plans. Nobody can sabotage what they don't understand. Nobody can copy what they cannot see. Nobody can prepare against what you never announce. While they were showing their cards, you were still holding your deck. Silence also changes how people see you. At first they ignore you. Then they question you. Then they watch you. Then they talk about you. Because mystery creates gravity. When you stop explaining yourself, people start trying to explain you. When you stop proving yourself, people start trying to figure you out. You learn that not every battle deserves your voice. Some battles are won by absence of reaction. Some victories come from refusing to lower yourself. Some power comes from simply knowing and not needing to prove that you know. And somewhere along the way, without announcements, without noise, without permission, your silence stopped being seen as weakness and started being felt as pressure. They really thought you were the easy target, the safe choice, the person they could overlook without consequences. It made them comfortable believing you were ordinary because it allowed them to feel superior without having to actually become better. That's how most people protect their ego. They minimize others instead of maximizing themselves. At first, it was small things, being ignored in conversations, your ideas being dismissed, your presence being treated like it didn't change anything. They looked past you like you were just another face in the background. But what they didn't understand is that the quietest person in the room is often the one rewriting the entire story. Underestimation is a dangerous gift. It gives you freedom. Freedom to move without pressure. Freedom to grow without being watched too closely. Freedom to make mistakes without being judged as harshly. While they were focused on people they considered threats, you were evolving right in their blind spot. And they only respect what they fear. And they only fear what they can see. Since they couldn't see your vision, your discipline, or your mental strength, they assumed it didn't exist. That assumption became their weakness, because when people think you're harmless, they stop being careful around you. They reveal strategies. They show intentions. They expose their true character. You became the one person they never prepared for. They joked when you were building. They relaxed when you were learning. They celebrated too early while you were still working. That's the thing about underestimation. It makes people lazy. They stopped improving because they thought they were already ahead. Meanwhile, you were still climbing without announcing your altitude. There's a certain kind of shock people experience when the person they ignored starts producing undeniable results. First comes denial. They say it's luck. Then comes justification. They say it won't last. Then comes discomfort. They start comparing. And finally comes realization. They picked the wrong person to doubt. You never needed to convince them. Time did that for you. Progress did that for you. Consistency did that for you. Because results speak a language that excuses cannot translate. And when your growth became visible, suddenly the same people who overlooked you started analyzing you. Now they ask questions they never thought to ask before. How did this happen? When did they improve? Why didn't we notice? But the real question they avoid is, why did they assume you couldn't? People often confuse kindness with weakness, calmness with lack of ability, patience with lack of ambition. You let them believe those illusions because correcting them would have required you to interrupt your progress. And progress was always more important than perception. They thought they understood your limits because they judged you based on your current position instead of your potential. They judged your chapter 1 like it was your final chapter. They saw your starting point and assumed it was your destination. That's the classic mistake of shallow thinkers. They evaluate people based on where they are, not where they're going. What makes this even more ironic is you never tried to fool them. You never pretended to be less. You never acted incapable. They created their own false story because it made them feel secure. And when reality broke that story, the discomfort they felt wasn't because you changed, it was because they were wrong. Now they speak your name with a different tone, not because you demanded respect, but because your actions forced a rewrite of their opinion. Respect that is forced through noise disappears quickly. Respect that is built through proof becomes permanent. Being underestimated also teaches something valuable. It shows who judges based on appearance and who looks deeper. It reveals who only values status and who values substance. Many people lost credibility in your eyes long before you gained credibility in theirs. And now the energy is different. The same rooms feel different. The same people act differently. The same voices carry hesitation they didn't have before. Not because you became arrogant, but because they finally realized you were never who they thought you were. A patience is something most people pretend to have until they are tested. Everyone says they can wait. Everyone says they can stay calm. Everyone says they trust the process until pressure arrives. That's where the difference showed. While others rushed, reacted, and made emotional decisions, you stayed still long enough to see what they were too impatient to hide. People reveal their true nature when they think time is running out. When they feel threatened, they stop thinking clearly. They talk too fast, act too quickly, and protect themselves too obviously. And while they were panicking, you were observing. Not because you were passive, but because you understood something they didn't. Time exposes what force cannot. Your patience wasn't about doing nothing. It was about doing the right things without rushing the outcome. Every day you held your discipline when it would have been easier to react. Every time you chose restraint instead of revenge, you were building psychological distance between you and their chaos. That distance gave you vision they never had. They thought waiting meant losing. They thought speed meant intelligence. They confused movement with progress. And because of that confusion, they walked straight into mistakes they could have avoided if they had just slowed down. Impatience makes people predictable. When someone cannot wait, you can almost calculate their next mistake. They will interrupt too early. They will celebrate too soon. They will attack without preparation. And most importantly, they will expose their intentions because they cannot tolerate uncertainty. You tolerated it. That alone separated you. There is something powerful about a person who can remain steady while everyone else is reacting. It creates pressure without effort. It makes others question themselves. Your calmness became a mirror, reflecting their lack of control back at them. And many couldn't handle what they saw. Some tried to provoke you because your patience made them uncomfortable. They wanted you to react so they could feel justified. They wanted proof you were like them. But every time you refused to break character, they lost a little more control over the situation. Because when one person refuses to play the emotional game, the other person eventually plays against themselves. And that's exactly what happened. They talked too much trying to get a reaction. They pushed too hard trying to create pressure. They overplayed their position trying to force a response. And in doing so, they revealed everything: their insecurity, their jealousy, their desperation to feel in control. Patience also gave you something else: a timing. While they were acting whenever they felt emotional, you moved only when it mattered. That difference is everything. Anyone can act. Very few know when to act. Timing turns small moves into big impact. Because you waited, you saw the right moments. Because you didn't rush, you avoided unnecessary battles. Because you stayed disciplined, your actions carried more weight when they finally happened. And the irony is they probably thought you were doing nothing. They thought your calm meant confusion. They thought your delay meant fear. They never realized patience is often a sign someone is thinking 10 steps ahead. While they were trying to win moments, you were building outcomes. The truth about patience is most people cannot fake it for long. Eventually, frustration leaks out. Ego leaks out. Fear leaks out. And when it does, masks fall off. You didn't need to expose anyone. They exposed themselves, trying to rush what you were willing to wait for. That's why patience isn't just endurance. It's strategy. It's emotional discipline. It's understanding that not every opportunity needs to be grabbed instantly, and not every insult needs an instant reply. Some victories only exist for those who can outlast the noise. And without announcing it, without confronting it directly, without forcing anything, your ability to wait calmly while they lost control became the exact reason their own actions started working against them. The truth has a strange way of surviving even the most careful attempts to hide it. People think secrets are protected by silence, but most secrets are actually destroyed by the very people trying to protect them. Pressure makes people careless. Guilt makes people nervous. Fear makes people talk. And sooner or later, what was supposed to stay hidden starts leaking through small cracks. Nobody plans to expose themselves. It happens in moments of frustration, in moments of ego, in moments where they feel too comfortable or too threatened. A wrong word here. A contradiction there. A reaction that doesn't match the story. And suddenly the perfect cover starts looking imperfect. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't need help to survive. Lies, on the other hand, require constant maintenance. They need remembering. They need coordination. They need emotional control. And most people aren't disciplined enough to maintain a lie forever. Eventually they forget what they said. Eventually they say too much. Eventually they reveal the very thing they were trying to bury. What made this situation almost poetic is that you didn't have to expose anything. You didn't need to argue. You didn't need to defend yourself. You didn't need to chase explanations. You simply stayed consistent while they tried to manage a story that kept changing. Consistency is dangerous to deception because truth doesn't need adjustments. While they were busy trying to control information, reality was quietly building evidence. Every small detail mattered. Every inconsistency added weight. Every nervous reaction added suspicion. And the more they tried to control the narrative, the more obvious it became that something wasn't right. Because people who are telling the truth rarely panic about being questioned. It's almost ironic. The more they tried to hide it, the more attention they brought to it. Over-explaining things nobody asked about. Defending points nobody challenged. Reacting emotionally to things that should have been simple. These are the small signals people miss when they only listen to words instead of watching behavior. Secrets also have another weakness. They depend on trust between people who are often united only by convenience. And convenience is fragile. The moment pressure increases, loyalty decreases. The moment consequences appear, people start protecting themselves first. That's when fingers start pointing and stories start changing. Someone always talks, not always intentionally. sometimes through anger, sometimes through carelessness, sometimes through the simple human need to feel understood. But the idea that many people can perfectly protect one secret forever is almost always an illusion. You understood something important without needing to say it. You understood that truth doesn't need noise. It only needs time. Time for contradictions to appear. Time for pressure to build. Time for reality to catch up with performance. And when it did, the exposure felt almost effortless. What makes a hidden truth powerful isn't just that it was hidden, but that once it appears, everything starts making sense. Suddenly, past behavior looks different. Past words sound different. Past situations become clearer. It's like a missing puzzle piece finally being placed, revealing a picture that was always there but never fully visible. The real mistake wasn't the secret itself. The real mistake was assuming truth can be permanently controlled. Truth is patient. It doesn't rush. It doesn't argue. It just waits for the right moment to become undeniable. And when that moment comes, it rarely arrives with drama. It arrives with clarity. You saw how quickly confidence turns into excuses when reality shows up. How quickly certainty turns into denial. How quickly control disappears when facts replace assumptions. Because once something hidden becomes visible, people cannot unsee it. And the most powerful part of all of this is you didn't need to celebrate it. Exposure was enough. Reality speaking for itself was enough. Watching everything fall into place without forcing it was enough. People love the idea that you suddenly changed. It helps them protect their pride. It allows them to believe they weren't wrong about you before, just that something about you became different. It's easier for them to say, "You changed," than to admit, "We failed to see you clearly." But the truth is much quieter than that. You didn't suddenly become stronger. You didn't suddenly become focused. You didn't suddenly become disciplined. Those things were always there. What actually changed was their attention. They finally started looking in your direction long enough to notice what had been consistent all along. Growth often looks invisible when nobody is paying attention. Day-by-day improvements don't make headlines. Small discipline doesn't create drama. Quiet self-respect doesn't attract crowds. So while you were putting pieces together slowly, they were busy watching louder stories. And because your journey didn't entertain them, they assumed it didn't exist. They saw results and confused them with transformation. But results are usually just the visible part of a long invisible process. Like seeing the top of a building without realizing how long the foundation took to build underground. What really happened is simple. You kept going when nobody was clapping. You kept improving when nobody was checking. You kept believing when nobody was asking about your progress. That kind of consistency doesn't create quick attention, but when it finally becomes visible, it creates lasting impact. Their surprise says more about their observation than your evolution. Because if someone only notices you when you succeed, it doesn't mean you just started working. It means they just started watching. And suddenly they start rewriting history in their minds. They say things like, "I always knew you had it in you," or "I knew you would get here." Not always because they supported you, but because people like to associate themselves with outcomes that look impressive. It's human nature to want proximity to progress, once it becomes obvious. What they don't see is how many times you almost quit quietly, how many doubts you handled privately, how many habits you built when motivation was absent. They only see the surface of a story that required depth they never witnessed. You also didn't become colder. You didn't become distant. You simply became more selective. There's a difference. When someone learns the value of their energy, they stop giving it freely to everyone. Not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. The version of you they see now is just the version that stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. The confidence they notice isn't new confidence. It's confidence that stopped being hidden. The boundaries they notice aren't new boundaries. They are boundaries you finally decided to enforce, and sometimes that makes people uncomfortable. Not because you did something wrong, but because they benefited from the version of you that asked for less. It's also interesting how quickly perception shifts. The same traits they once ignored become the traits they now admire. Your quiet nature becomes focus. Your independence becomes strength. Your caution becomes wisdom. Nothing changed except the results that forced them to reinterpret what was always there. Recognition often arrives late, not because you were late, but because awareness was. And maybe the most satisfying part is you didn't need to announce any of it. No speeches. No declarations. No need to say, "Look at me now." Reality said it louder than words ever could. Because in the end, the biggest shift wasn't in your character. It was in their realization. And that realization came from finally seeing what had been standing in front of them the entire time.